from my most recent book, in part which centres on the death of my father. And Dad had Parkinson's for many years, and as I was writing these poems, I was thinking how unusual that is actually as a subject for poetry, that we write about elements of old age, but poetry sometimes isn't large enough for those sorts of experiences. And so these poems are kind of an attempt at entering that country. My father is a giant koi. My father is at the bottom of a pond, perfecting the art of a circle. He is guiding the mottled zeppelin of his body in a single unceasing turn, like a monorail running on greased steel, like an ice skater swerving on a blade. His scales are lava and ember, dappled with carbon. His tail a luxurious Japanese fan. He is so far beneath the green skin of duckweed, he cannot make me out, or I him. What he knows is shrinking into round facts, days like mossed stones, each the same weight, spears of water hyacinth rising around him like jail bars, reek of peat. He has been down there for years, ancient god of the dark, keeper of the single koan, moving in currents only he can sense, fluent as a windsock. He surfaces 3 times a day when the nurse brings a tray, cold blanched carrot and beef, white sauce fillet of whiting, pound cake. He cannot trust the scratched headlamps of his eyes, so he navigates by feel, angling his huge whiskered head, mouth first towards the fork, weaving like an adder charmed by smoke. Then he bites down to find the world suddenly there again, solid as metal and bait. I'm going to read a cluster from this first section of the book, which are about Dad, and then I will take us somewhere else for the second part of my reading. This poem is called The Gift. In the garden, my father sits in his wheelchair, garlanded by summer hibiscus, like a saint in a 17th century cartouche. A flowering wreath buzzes around his head, passionate red. He holds the gift of death in his lap, small, oblong, wrapped in black. He has been waiting 17 years to open it and is impatient. When I ask how he is, my father cries. His crying comes as a visitation, the body squeezing tears from his ducts tenderly, as a nurse measuring drops of calamine from an amber bottle, as a teen at the car wash wringing a chamois of suds. It is a kind of miracle to see my father weeping this freely, weeping for what is owed him. How are you? I ask again, because his answer depends on an instant's microclimate. His moods bloom and retreat like an anemone as the cold currents whirl around him, crying 1 minute, sedate the next. But today, my father is disconsolate. I'm having a bad day, he says, and tries again. I'm having a bad year. I'm having a bad decade. I hate myself for noticing his poetry, the triplet that should not be beautiful to my ear, but is. Day, year, decade, scale of awful economy. I want to give him his present, but it is not mine to give. We sit as if mother and son on Christmas Eve, waiting for midnight to tick over, anticipating the moment we can open his present together. First, my father holding it up to his ear and shaking it. Then me helping him peel back the paper, the weight of his death knocking. And once the box is unwrapped, it will be mine. I will carry the gift of his death endlessly. Every day I will know it opening in me. I'll read the title poem just to take us back to my father for a moment. One of the stranger episodes in Dad's Parkinson's, he became a bit of a compulsive spender, which is a lesser known but common symptom of Parkinson's. And the sort of apex, or what's the opposite of an apex? Apogee, zenith, I don't know. The lowest point was when he bought a vintage Jaguar car off eBay without discussing it with Mum after he'd surrendered his driver's licence. So this is the poem that kind of takes that moment. The Jaguar. It shone like an insect in the driveway, iridescent emerald, out of season Christmas beetle, metallic flecks in the paint like riverbed tailings, squeaking doe-skinned seats. Bottle green, my father called it, or else forest. A folly he bought without test driving, vintage 1980 XJ, a rebellion against his tremor. The sole bidder, he won the auction without trying, the day after the doctor told him to draw a line under his driving years. My mother didn't speak for weeks. It gleamed on the terracotta drive, wildcat forever lunging on the hood, predatory, the chrome snagging in the sun, ornament of my father's madness, miraculous and sleek, until he started to tinker, painted the leather seats with acrylic so they peeled and cracked, jacked the gear stick, hacked a hole into the dash with a Stanley knife, jury-rigged the driver's seat so it sat so low you couldn't see over the dash. For months, he drove it, even though my mother begged. He drove it as though he was punishing her, dangerously fast on the back roads, then opened up the engine on the highway, full throttle, even though he was going blind in one eye, even though my mother and I refused to get in. And for the first time in years, my father was happy. He was happy to be driving. He was happy my mother and I were miserable. Finally, his modifications killed it. The car he had always wanted and waited so long to buy. And it sat like a carcass in the garage, like a headstone, like a coffin. But it's no symbol or metaphor. I can't make anything of it.